I did have a writer's room about 10 years ago. I had the writer's room, and they were turning in scripts that weren't up to par for my audience. I've been working with this audience and cultivating for 25
Yeah.
years, so I know what they want. So I would have to pay them to write the scripts. When they turn into bad scripts, I got to pay them to rewrite the scripts.
Right.
And then I would go and rewrite the script, and then they go to WGA and they grieve me and say he rewrote the script and pay me again. So it was just such an ugly situation. So I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to write because I know that my audience knows my voice.
All right, Tyler Perry fans, this video has been a long time coming. I put up a poll, I want to say either a week or two ago, and a majority of people wanted me to talk about it. I said, guys, should I do a video talking about the history of Tyler Perry and writers' rooms, and you know why he has been reluctant to get one for so long, and you know what happened in the past, things of that nature. And I felt like this is it. You know, like this is the last time I ever want to talk about it. So this video might be a bit lengthy, but I will back it up with facts, you know, articles, interviews. I might use clips here and there like I did at the beginning of the video. You know, I'll leave links to articles and videos in the top comment. You know how I do by now. Like I'll put a comment, I'll pin it to the top saying, here's a link to this interview, here's a link to this article. That way you know what's fact, what's fiction. So it's not an unfamiliar topic of discussion that fans, or should I say viewers in general, no, I will say there are legit Tyler Perry fans who literally love Tyler Perry and his projects, but at the same time, they aren't stans. They don't have a blind allegiance. They will point out that, yeah, this episode, this movie, it could have used more writing. It could use, or better writing. It could have used more time to film and things of that nature. But, you know, I feel like this video is pretty much, you know, like my particular or my personal benediction on the topic, you know. So with that being said, let's get into Tyler Perry's history with the writer's room. Now, some of these things, I feel like if you've been following, you know, Tyler Perry and how he's addressed this in many interviews, more recently the Sisters After Show, what you're about to hear really isn't new. You heard it before. But I think a lot of people don't know that he actually has current and upcoming projects that do have writers that aren't Tyler Perry. So before getting into it, make sure you take a moment to thumbs up the video. Also hit the subscribe button to help me close in on 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're currently at 185,000 and some change, so we need less than 15,000 to get there. And yeah, you know, as always, the links to my social media platforms if you want to reach out to me are in the description below. And I'm well aware, you know, a few people left a comment on my poll saying, Jeremy, you know, if you do this video, you're never going to be a super fan. I don't really care because this video isn't me bashing Tyler Perry. This is me talking about the facts. Like I said, I'm going to have articles and interviews and things like that to back up what I'm saying. So if anybody feels like I'm stepping on their toes by talking about it, then that says more about them than me, because I'm a consumer and reviewer of Tyler Perry projects. So with that being said, the first thing that comes to mind is, what does Tyler Perry mean when he refers to the fact that he had a writer's room in the past, and as a result of that, it led to his shows. We're mainly talking about the TBS era of Tyler Perry, not counting WB when he was over there with House of Pain before going to TBS, but this all really started during the TBS days. You know, the days of House of Pain, Meet the Browns, and then eventually, for better or worse, before he moved over to the OWN network, where we had the Haves and the Have-Nots, Love Thy Neighbor, eventually, If Loving You Was Wrong, kind of a side quest, if you will, to have Too Close to Home on TLC, and eventually The Pains before he went over to Viacom. So we're talking about the first era of Tyler Perry television on TBS. Now, there was a time where House of Pain and Meet the Browns were just destroying it in ratings. Like, it was must-see television on Tuesday or Wednesday night, whichever nights they came on back in the day. And, you know, not to get into my own autobiography, but I've said it many times that there were times where me and my family would watch every single episode, but then they kept changing the time slots and the shows kept getting later and later. Like, they'll have like a 5-hour marathon, but the new episode or episodes wouldn't come on until like 9 or 10. Parents had to wake up early to go to work. My sister and I had to wake up early to catch the bus. Not to mention, as we got older, you know, we got homework that was more intense than the year before, especially me in college classes. So there was a time where there were like at least several seasons, if not a couple years, where I just didn't watch Tyler Perry stuff, at least the new stuff, consistently because of the, you know, time slots just being all over the place. Now, I wasn't able to find out if the reason the episodes got pushed back and time slots got screwed up was due to the drop in ratings. So I don't have the facts to back that up, but that does actually make sense if that were the case, because as soon as the ratings began to dip for House of Pain and Meet the Browns, TBS was like, we'll just throw the episodes on anytime. Yet they still continue to have those marathons. For a more present day example, if you watch Cartoon Network or you have children or younger relatives and they flip on the you flip on the TV for them and you notice that Teen Titans Go seems to just always be on television and marathons before they show a new episode, that's really what TBS was doing with House of Pain and Meet the Browns. But at first, while the shows were doing well, and I've made this example in many videos before, typically it's like Tyler Perry is holding one show in one hand and the other show in his other hand. So 2 hands, 2 shows. House of Pain, Meet the Browns. He's doing these shows, ratings through the roof. But whenever he adds in that third show, in this case, For Better or Worse, which I've already done a video on it recently as to why I haven't really watched the show and my reluctance to even watch it. Once he gets that third show, it's like he goes from just holding 2 things to juggling, you know, to juggling both 3 shows. And as a result, the ratings, and not just the ratings, but the quality of his shows begins to decline. Not just the show he just introduced to his hands or the audience, but the 2 shows prior to the third, which are doing great in ratings. TBS apparently had some focus groups test audiences, and they noticed that, you know, hey, when the show first started, House of Pain, Meet the Browns, everything was great. But over time, as you started to do more projects, you know, For Better or Worse, you might have done other movies or, you know, other plays. That's when we noticed there's been a decline in the quality of your work. And as a result, you know, Tyler pretty much said, hey, you hired me for ratings. I'm getting you ratings. You know, why are you, you know, dogging me about it? It's like, I'm going to do it my way. So when it came time to renew the contract with Tyler Perry, TBS didn't want to do it. So they didn't sign up Tyler Perry to put out more projects for their network because the ratings were no longer what they used to be. And an article by the Daily Mail, and I did a video on this at least 2 or 3 years ago, and it got a pretty decent amount of views. I believe it's a UK article called the Daily Mail article. Again, I will leave a link in the comment section below. It pretty much broke down the fallout between Tyler Perry and Oprah. Basically, it was the same thing with the OWN network that Tyler Perry went through with TBS. When he first put out 2 shows, Love Thy Neighbor, Have and Have Nots, ratings and quality of the shows were through the roof. They were the mainstays of the network. They brought people to the OWN network because at the time, Tyler Perry didn't have a major deal because TBS wouldn't renew a new contract. Oprah at the time had just put out the OWN network and she needed help to help that network thrive. So it was kind of like, you know, hey, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And as a result, everything was all good. But over time, when he introduced, you know, If Loving You Was Wrong, and basically had more than 2 solid projects on the OWN network, Oprah allegedly had focus groups, test audiences come in. They said the same thing as TBS. Hey, we noticed there's been a decline in the quality of the shows. It might be stronger if you had other writers to help you make the storylines tighter. Tyler Perry's retort: you hired me in order to get high ratings. The ratings are extremely high, higher than your other shows. You let me do me. And the headline of the article, as well as other things online, was that Tyler Perry and Oprah have a major falling out. Oprah claims Tyler's difficult to work with. He can't take constructive criticism. In a sense, it almost sounded like, and I'm not trying to, throw her under the bus, but it is similar to what Monique has been saying about how Oprah, Tyler Perry, and other people say, oh, you're difficult to work with, and this and that. So it kind of was in the same vein. Not to say Oprah blackballed Tyler Perry, but the article made it seem like these two friends were having a major fallout. So I will say this. 2 days later, I believe it was, 2 days later from the time the article was originally published, E.T. actually has an interview / statement from Tyler Perry debunking the entire article, saying that couldn't be anything further from the truth. The only thing that's fact in that article is Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey are names. And Gayle King also came out and said, the article, I got a screenshot of it, somebody sent it to me, and that's crazy because I just saw Oprah and Tyler together. It was all love. So I don't really know what the news came from. So I have to apologize because my video that did very well where I talked about this article, apparently it wasn't true. So I apologize to Tyler Perry and Oprah because I will admit the article did seem very legit. But at the same time, that was my bad for not doing the research back then that I should have done. So yeah, there we go with that. But eventually he signed his deal with Viacom, and Tyler Perry left OWN / Discovery and is now at Viacom, where it looks like he is been given a bigger playground to produce work at than the OWN network, because it seems like, I don't know if, there's ever been a full-on interview about the TBS days. The main thing I feel like Tyler Perry stated about the TBS, I believe that the TBS situation did happen where focus groups were brought in, but he said no, the ratings were high, but then because of the noticeable dip in ratings, TBS decided not to sign him back on. And then with OWN, I just feel like it was a time thing, like it was never supposed to be a permanent alliance between Tyler Perry and Oprah. It's like, hey, you have a new network, I have upcoming material, and I could use a network to promote it on, so I'll help you keep OWN stay afloat. And, as soon as another ship comes in, I'll hop aboard that. So it's not like I'm planting my roots at OWN, but, I'm using OWN to sow seeds, and then, you cultivate them. And then as soon as I leave for the next deal, OWN will be good to go. Which evidently isn't the case, given that Oprah has shared over 90% of her shares to Discovery, and OWN, I don't know what they got in store next. But basically, to really dig deep into the days of TBS, there was a writer's room. Tyler Perry went from non-union writers to WGA, or the Writers Guild. And basically that means, if you hire people from WGA, it's going to cost more money than non-union writers. And then, there's the arguments and different articles and sources that say Tyler Perry doesn't want to hire writers because once shows are syndicated, he didn't want to give them a piece of the pie and this and that. There have been some quote unquote, as somewhat labeled, disgruntled employees, but there were indeed writers during the TBS days, and the ratings were indeed decreasing because Tyler felt like the writers were not speaking to his audience the same way he was. So, there is some fact behind these statements here. So, he also mentions in the interview that the more money, obviously paying WGA workers is more expensive. But the thing about it is, I'm paying more money for these writers, but the ratings are going down. And then from there, he decided, I'm just going to do it all myself. So, he decided to take the carriage, drive the horse himself without a driver, and write his own content. And that's pretty much it. That's the basic history of Tyler Perry's time with the writers' room, from the days of TBS to the days of the OWN network. Mainly only the TBS days, because like I said, that E.T. interview pretty much debunks the Daily Mail article, which again does sound very convincing when you really think about it.
So I don't know if you know this, but all shows on television have a writer's room. And most of the time there are 10 people, 12, whatever, that write all these television shows, right? Well, I have no writer's room. Nobody writes any of my work. I write it all. Why am I telling you this? I wrote all of these scripts by myself in 20 19. What's my point? Work ethic.
There was a lot of chatter about the writer's room, and I was like, why are people mad that Tyler over here pulling the Mariah? He write his own stuff.
Yeah.
How did you feel, though?
I don't get that either, because I did have a writer's room and did have his situation. It was the worst experience I've ever had in my career, dealing with that whole situation. So and the ratings for my shows went down when I had those people, because people know my voice.
Ah, yes, the viral video of January 2020. It's hard to tell which went more viral, the video you just saw about work ethic versus the screenshots of a fall from grace and the bad hair pieces. But yes, the no writer's room video is what sparked a lot of backlash on the internet from people who have watched Tyler Perry projects, saying that you need a writer's room. This explains why the dialogue is so repetitive. It's so bad. You know, Tyler Perry talks about speaking to his audience, but who's he speaking to? Like, who talks like that? And, you know, I remember at the time being blown away. You know, what was it? And I'm probably going to miss some of the shows, but I'm just speaking from memory. Young Dylan, Bruh, Sisters, The Oval, Ruthless, Have and Have Nots. Just to name a few. I know there were like over 6 shows, but basically it really didn't hit, I guess you could say, people the way he had hoped, you know? You know, the fact he did all this writing in like, what, 1 year, like in 2019? And I think his intention was to inspire people to, like, you know, work hard and, you know, achieve their goals. And it's like, hey, I did this without a writer's room. But then when we actually saw the product that came from that video, such as season 1 of Assisted Living, season 9 of House of Pain, to an extent, The Oval, we saw why he was able to write so much in such a short amount of time. I believe he says that typically he can write a season of a series in about 2 weeks. It's due to the fact that, for the most part, the characters stand around and talk in circles. In The Oval, you could tell 70% of the script was ma'am and sir, which thankfully they definitely, you know, reduced that in season 2. But overall, when we finally got the premieres of the shows that he wrote in that video, the scripts, fans definitely saw, you know, that video didn't go away. It kept coming up later that year when, you know, we got the debut of House of Pain, Assisted Living, and all these other shows. You could see in the writing that, oh my God, no wonder he's able to, you know, write it so quickly, because it's just the same thing. And these characters, what? And they're just talking and they're doing the same thing over and over again. So it's funny because when you fast forward to November 2020, which is, wow, it's hard to believe that was almost a full year ago, he actually made the announcement that he will be hiring more writers for future projects, which is definitely something that had people wondering, wow, is that true? You know, at the top of the year, you were like, yeah, I do everything myself. But then towards the end of the year, it's like, no, I'm going to allow more opportunities. And that's actually pretty interesting. I mean, he even dives in a bit more later on once we learn of his billionaire status, and he did a interview, I think, Variety. And even going back before that, in September 2019, he opened a new production company with Tim Palin, aka his partner in crime, if you will, who created the Madea franchise together. This is called Peachtree and Vine Productions. It's a non-exclusive joint venture focused on film, television, digital content that will be both scripted and non-scripted material. The company will be affected by Tyler Perry's Viacom contract, meaning that it's going to be influenced in some way in regards to like how much work Tyler Perry is going to put into this production company. It really much depends on how busy he is with Viacom, which could explain why he's been more open to allowing more writers and producers and directors to take the helm instead of him doing every single thing by himself. Now, there are a number of projects, both current and future, that have more than just Tyler Perry doing everything for, you know, well, I guess you could say, I don't want to say for himself, but it's not going to have Tyler Perry wearing the hats of director, writer, producer. It's going to be other people doing work as well.
So all of you who think I needed a writer's room, let me just say this. We do have writer's rooms on some of the other shows now, and there will be other writer's rooms to come, right? But what happened in the past is when I had a writer's room, the first thing that happened when the show's going on air, the ratings tanked. People know my voice, they know how I write. And have you ever thought for 1 minute, just 1 second, that I'm specific in what I'm doing? That I'm telling the stories the way that the audience wants to see it? Don't worry about it. I got this, and that's why the show is #1.
I mean, there are projects out there that have other writers and directors, most notably, you know, Young Dylan on Nickelodeon. I haven't watched every single episode. I still haven't watched the entirety of season 1, but I will say I've enjoyed what I've seen. I feel like the show definitely speaks to the intended audience, as well as having decent quality overall. I think for the main part of the show, you know, I kind of chuckled at myself the first time I addressed it, but it's the fact that the characters aren't really seen wearing the same thing all that often. You know, like when you're watching like the Haves and the Have-Nots, or, you know, Loving You Is Wrong, or The Oval, you could see a character wearing the same outfit for damn near half, if not an entire season. But Young Dylan, you know, seems definitely episodic. You know, there are some long-running storylines, but for the most part, it just feels like a fun show for kids. And when it comes to the current seasons of Assisted Living and House of Pain, I've praised both of them because of the massive improvements, and it turns out it's because Tyler Perry has writers' rooms on both of those shows. But the sad part is the ratings are down compared to the previous seasons. And my goodness, season 9 of House of Pain and season 1 of Assisted Living were awful. But with season 2 of Assisted Living and season 10 of House of Pain, I've said it many times, I feel like the new people or somebody at Tyler Perry Studios who works on Assisted Living potentially watch my videos on them, because as far as I can tell, I was the only person reviewing season 1. I feel like somebody like took notes on damn near every video I did and put it into action. It's like, hey, here's a list of all the things Jeremy said were messed up, and they fixed them in season 2. House of Pain, I feel like the episodes are more structured. I feel like for the most part the characters are better utilized. I'll say that Assisted Living gets an A+ in improvement. House of Pain gets an A-, mainly because Janine and Jasmine are missing, but I do appreciate they're working with the characters they do have. The Oval season 2, oh, well, actually, no, let me not use that example because Tyler's still doing that himself. But yes, I think that Assisted Living and House of Pain are great now. Not as great as the original Meet the Browns and House of Pain series on TBS, but massive improvements over what we saw. But my fear is the fact that there are writers' rooms on those two projects. I feel Tyler Perry might look at the ratings of the shows now and be like, see, now you see, that's why I don't have writers' rooms. Because I had it just like this in the past. I had writers doing everything for me, but then as soon as they, you know, as soon as I walked away and they did their thing, ratings began to drop. But the thing about it is, at least from my corner of the internet, a lot of fans flat out said, I'm not watching Assisted Living season 2 because I quit not even halfway through season 1. Or Jasmine and Janine are gone, I'm not watching House of Pain anymore. So I'm not blaming the current writers for the dip in ratings. Like, I honestly wish I could tell you why the ratings are gone. Perhaps it is the writing, but as far as I'm concerned, no, it ain't. Because if you compare season 1 of Assisted Living to season 2, or season 9 of House of Pain to season 10, you'll see the difference. You will see the difference. Now, going on to an upcoming project, All the Queen's Men. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I've already done 2 separate All the Queen's Men videos this morning. One about the extended trailer, as well as the one about Eva's interview with GMA. But basically, Christian Keys was originally, like, you know, the head guy on this project because All the Queen's Men is a result of his book, which was originally going to be a movie. But after seeing the script, Tyler Perry was like, you know what, we ought to make this into a series. And then during one of the action scenes with guns, Tyler Perry just so happened to be riding by on his bicycle and was like, whoa, I want to be in this. I mean, I want to be a part of this. And then Eva said that's how he evolved from being a person, you know, green lighting the movie into a series, but then also being behind the chair. So it's called Tyler Perry's All the Queen's Men. I don't know why it's called Tyler Perry's All the Queen's Men necessarily. Is Tyler Perry's name attached to it for the notoriety? Because, you know, if Tyler Perry's name is on it, I feel like it'll get more traction. Or is it because he contributed that much to the project? Was it always going to be called Tyler Perry's All the Queen's Men? But, you know, it would be Christian Key's kind of, you know, the head honcho behind the scenes. I don't know. But either way, there are a number of writers, directors, producers. It's not just Tyler Perry, which is how I feel like this show could actually blow up pretty damn big. It's going to be part of Tyler Perry Studios' structured development arm, Pitch Black Development, LLC. Michelle Sneed, who is the president of production and development, will be behind this series. So Tyler Perry Studios, it's like the man said. Even though there aren't writers' rooms on some of his major shows like The Oval and Sisters, there are current as well as future projects that will have opportunities for new writers. Now, let me just say this much, because it kind of reminds me of Disney live action films. It's like, or should I say live action remakes or interpretations of previous Disney classics. Why does Disney put out more live actions? We hate them. They're trash. You know, the original animated ones were the best. We don't need a retelling with awful graphics when the animated ones do it great. Say what you want. I'm not saying they're great either. I personally enjoyed the Will Smith Aladdin, but it was kind of a one and done for me. I did buy like did I buy like a steelbook case, a 4K or a Blu-ray? I know it was marked the hell down at Target when I bought it. It was like less than $10 but I bought it. I still haven't opened it. I've watched the Beauty and the Beast one twice. I've never watched The Lion King, nor do I even want to watch it. And I can't think of any other live action. I didn't watch Mulan. Yeah, basically, some of those movies killed it at the box office. I believe The Lion King just did insane. But the way I look at it is this, because I watched some videos going over it too. These movies are obviously made for cash grabs, and it seems lazy. Why don't you do more original movies, or why don't you do live action retellings of some of the more underrated movies, like, you know, Atlantis, The Lost Empire and whatnot, which I would love that, by the way. Somebody made a good point to say, you know what? The reason Disney does these movies is because they know it'll draw people in. People who want to watch for nostalgia, as well as people who watch because they want to just, oh, the trailer was awful. I want to go see how awful the movie is. But because those movies, even though people might hate them, because those movies do so well, that brings in more money to Disney to work on other projects that people want to see. You know, well, you know, people would love, like, you know, hey, these 3 major live action movies might get a lot of hate, but they bring in a lot of money, and then that money is used for other things. I kind of feel the same way when I really think, I mean, I feel like I've gained somewhat of a new appreciation for what Tyler Perry does, because I took time to reflect. I did some research and I watched old interviews. And I really think about the fact that perhaps the reason he decided to put new writers and directors on House of Pain and Assisted Living was because of the fact that the 2 major shows on the network, I feel like it's no debate here, The Oval and Sisters are the heavy hitters. So Tyler Perry said, let me do these solo to make sure I maintain ratings, as opposed to putting new writers and directors on Sisters or The Oval. Because if those 2 shows were to begin to tank in ratings, that could impact Tyler Perry's upcoming contract with Viacom. I don't know if he's going to renew. I don't know if they'll give him a more exclusive contract, which would be even longer than the first one. I have no idea. But just thinking about the TBS days, it's like, you know, back in those days, my 2 heavy hitters, you know, Meet the Browns, House of Pain, when I put other people on it, the projects began to tank, and, you know, the ratings went down, and then TBS didn't renew my deal. So I'm not going to do this again with Viacom. You know, I'll put writers and directors on other shows, but they won't be the #1. They won't be the shows that get noticed as the #1 Tuesday night or Wednesday night television show. So while Tyler Perry is writing all of Sisters and all of The Oval, he's taking the bows and arrows from people who rag on those shows for the bad wigs or the bad writing or the bad acting, because those shows still do good in ratings. And because they do good in ratings, it allows Tyler Perry to have more of a presence in Viacom if there is a contract or new contract, so he can create other projects. Like, you know what, Tyler, because the sister series and the Oval are still blowing it out of the ballpark, we're going to let you do 3 more shows. And then those 3 shows could be the products he allows other writers, directors, and producers for. So it's almost like, you know, yin and yang. The yin is that, hey, other new writers and directors, but then the yang is like, okay, he's still writing the shows most people watch, but it's not really that good. So, you know, either way, I think that there's a good and bad to this situation. I think that I really do appreciate it, because I've always said straight up, even though I might not always like the writing choices Tyler Perry makes, I just love the fact that he creates opportunities. It's the same thing with Kevin Hart. Personally, I don't find his stand-up as funny as his earlier work, but I'm never going to, you know, rag on the guy, because his work ethic, not to quote that video Tyler Perry did, but the work ethic is insane. I will never not say, well, you will never hear me say Tyler Perry is lazy. Sure, the writing might come across lazy, but the man himself is not lazy, because he's always thinking of a new project. He's always working on something. But at the core, I just love hearing stories from cast members and whatnot. That's why I appreciated the Sisters After Show, when we hear about the cast and how they got selected and their life before the projects. Tyler Perry's always changing somebody's life. Even though we might rag on a certain episode, I might give an episode a -2. I might give it like a 4. I might say this season was trash. He's always changing lives, and as a result, you know, that leads to another question. Well, technically, it's like a 2-part question. Will Tyler Perry ever improve his writing? But then on the flip side, does he even have to? Because I think it's fair to say at this point, he kind of knows people are going to watch what he does, regardless as to whether or not it's as good as the first couple seasons of the Haves and the Have-Nots, or if it's as trash as the Pain series on the OWN network. People will watch. It's like he was saying during the Diary of a Mad Black Tweeter segment of the Sisters After Show. It's like, you know, so-and-so said this, but they're not a fan, but hey, they're still watching it, right? So it's kind of like on YouTube, where the dislike button and, you know, well, let me just be more specific, trolls in the comments. It's like, at first I remember it started to get to me, but then I realized, no, the more comments on the video, the more YouTube recognizes, hey, that video has like 75 comments, so we might as well promote it more to viewers because people are engaging. So basically, any kind of video engagement from viewers actually helps a video. Like, I don't care if like 50 comments say you suck, you're a troll, you just want to be working with Tyler Perry and you're mad that he doesn't hire you, that kind of thing. I used to care, but I don't now, because I know it's not true, obviously. I have dedicated followers who will go after these people for me. So the more comments in my video, the more views they get, and the more ad revenue I make, the more money I have. It's kind of the same thing with Tyler Perry. Like, no matter how many people talk about wigs or, you know, the bad writing, the prostate tickling, if the ratings are there, he wins. So he could put out the best season he's ever written of a certain show, but there's always going to be somebody talking about this wig, that dress, they're in the same set, the pacing's off, whatever. But I mean, he's a freaking billionaire, and he could do what he wants to do. So the thing about it is, we know Tyler Perry is, I feel like that's what hurts and that's what annoys some fans, and I mean the real fans the most. We know he's capable of writing better than he's been putting out recently in the past, you know, several years. I feel like that's the part that really has people going, yeah, that you know, no, this ain't working, because that video with those piles of scripts, that's all well and good, but none of these shows really compare to the quality of your early plays, your early movies, the first season or so of some of your earlier shows on different networks. But it's like, if you got paid, let's say your boss decides to give you a $10,000 raise at your job, and they say, and you've been busting your ass there for like 10 years, and they say, hey, you know what, here's this huge bonus right into your annual salary, but you're actually, you know, you're working the same job, but you don't have to produce even 30% of what you used to. Now, would you continue to work at the same pace with the increase in money, Or would you just decide to just kick back and kind of half-ass it? Well, not even half, because you're not even giving, 50% of what you usually did. You would show up to your job, you would work the same hours, but you only had to put in like barely 30% of the effort for way more money than you did when you were giving 100% of your effort for less money. Answer honestly. So I'm not saying Tyler Perry's lazy, like I said. It's just that for him, the hunger doesn't really seem to be there in his work like it used to be. Obviously, it's like, well, Jeremy, you said he's not lazy. He's producing a lot of stuff. All true, but I feel like a lot of his writing, that is, for his shows that he does solo, I feel like they don't have the same amount of heart that they used to for some of his earlier projects. I mean, like, there used to be a time where certain shows, like, each episode hits you in one way, shape, or form. But then, going back to somebody's comment on one of my videos, like, damn, why do you even watch? It's like, this entire season of this particular show, you've been giving it scores of like 4s and 3s. And I'm like, damn, you're right about that. So, I mean, does he have to do better? Not really. Because, again, as long as the ratings are there, why would you change? When you look at it from that perspective, I'm not looking as a fan, a long-time consumer of his products, but if I were in Tyler Perry's shoes, would I change? It's like me. Like, if I, put up like one video a week, just one. The video's like, let's say 10 minutes long. I'm talking about anything. And let's say I was making triple the ad revenue a month that I do now. And people are like, Jeremy, you need to go back to doing your reviews of this show and that show instead of just talking about anime or music. Would I do it? Probably not. Because it's like, okay, Jeremy, you're making this amount of money now doing all these videos per week. But what if I told you, if you did only one video a week and they could be about anything you wanted and they don't even have to take anywhere near the time you do now, you'll be making like 5 times the money. Would you do it? Yeah. So I kind of look at it from that perspective when I think about the Tyler Perry machine. So I feel like even though there's a loud group of people who talk about the quality and whatnot, there's always going to be people watching Tyler Perry, and he's found his audience. I don't exactly know what that audience consists of. I'm thinking mainly women, middle to older women. It's just like, I don't think a lot of the content is quote unquote meant for me. A 30-year-old black guy, but I still get a kick out of talking about the shows because I grew up with it. But I guess we all get to a point where we realize, yeah, I guess I'm not the target audience anymore. I'm not the core audience. I will say, though, quality aside, if you will, when you look at the various genres of shows he has on the networks now, you could tell that he kind of has something for everybody. A kid's show in Young Dylan, a women's focused show in Sisters, a male focused show in Bruh, Ruthless in the Oval. Yeah, Oval is kind of like the new Haves and Have-Nots / Scandal, whereas Ruthless is just like batshit crazy. And going back to what I said before, he creates opportunity. There are a lot of people that work on Tyler Perry projects, and then something bigger comes along and they blow up from there, And it's not that they don't want to work with Tyler Perry again. It's like, that's the whole point of Tyler Perry Studios, his writing, his studio. It's to pretty much give opportunities, revitalize careers to those who may not have gotten a shot with Hollywood. And after being in a Tyler Perry project, their rates go up, their resume, their IMDb gets longer, and they're able to use that to secure the bag on other productions. Not just for those in front of the camera, but for those behind the camera too. So even though I might not always love Tyler Perry's writing style, he's always looking out for the little guy, So I feel like he's looking out for the people that Hollywood sticks their nose up at. So I get it. The people say, well, why don't you make your own show instead of criticizing Tyler Perry? This is kind of like why I'm done with the subject. This is like the last time I ever, unless Tyler Perry himself says anything else about a writer's room in regards to new information that I haven't covered in this video, or let's say there is a former or current writer talking about their time in Tyler Perry projects, I just want to say, please take a moment to do research. Like, I get it. It's easy to follow the masses, like when you see something trending. But the thing about it is, when the prostate tickling trended, and I saw the clip, I'm like, wait, all these, the Breakfast Club articles, different videos and everything, you know, Twitter, they're all saying in a recent episode, and I'm like, guys, this is an episode from season 1 of Sisters. This isn't season 3. A lot of these people talking about, you know, what's viral, Tyler Perry, it's like, I just hate it because they don't, these are people who aren't real fans. These are people who don't do their research. Because the reason I'm mainly tired about talking about the Tyler Perry writing thing is the fact that a lot of the projects that we're currently watching are projects that are a year plus old. You know, things that he did a while ago. So while people are dragging Tyler Perry for things he did a couple years ago, they're neglecting to see there are current projects out here that aren't all Tyler Perry focused. There are other writers and directors. So if only a little bit of energy, if even a fraction of the energy people take towards dragging Tyler Perry and his writing style were given to focusing on the upcoming and current projects that don't always have Tyler Perry at the helm, the ratings for Assisted Living in House of Pain will be through the roof. So, you know, that's it. So, Jim, let me just say, just thank you, Tyler Perry, for creating these opportunities for, you know, the cast members, the people behind the scenes. It just, I mean, doing the research for this video just gave me more of an appreciation of what you do. You know, will there be a time where I'm done with Tyler Perry projects completely? Maybe, because there might come a day where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm the audience Tyler Perry's speaking to, or okay, you know what, I've been doing this too long, the writing's not going to change. I realize technically he doesn't have to change because the ratings are still there, people are still watching Tyler Perry, and I feel like, you know, a lot of people, myself included, based on how the haves and the have-nots ended, it's very difficult to see yourself getting attached to another series because the fear, the crippling fear is, okay, we're in season 3 of this show, but do I really want to give all my time and energy to this show and then Tyler Perry gets me again with a shitty ending and then I start to cycle all over again? Or do I pick another show or, you know, other shows with better writing, overall production and whatnot and get invested in that? But I feel like overall, aside from creating opportunity, aside from all the writing he does solo, I think what Tyler Perry has above other producers and studios and whatnot is the rate in which he puts out content. I mean, let's be real here. If it isn't Baby Boy or a rerun of Martin or The Fresh Prince, you're either watching a Tyler Perry movie or a Tyler Perry series on BET. And as a result, you know, the pandemic putting so many people behind, but then Tyler Perry being the first studio, being one of, if not the first studio to open up during the pandemic, he was able to put people to work, but also, more importantly, keep them safe and healthy. And I said this, I'll always appreciate him for that. And I love me some season 2 of Sisters. I think the great debate is what's better, season 1 or season 2. Season 3 has definitely been a major downgrade, but season 2 was so good, not only in quality, but also the fact that, oh damn, it picked up where we left off, and you didn't even know it was filmed during the pandemic because everything, you know, flowed together so seamlessly. But I just have to say that, you know, I hope this video did the best that it could in getting the point across of why Tyler Perry's been reluctant to get a writer's room since the TBS days. Like I said, I'll leave plenty of links to different articles and video interviews of different things I've stated within the video itself. If you happen to be somebody who is currently or has worked with Tyler Perry in the past, and maybe some of my details were a little bit off, my research wasn't complete, or maybe you have some insight that I didn't cover in the video because guess what, I wasn't there, feel free to let me know in the comments. Hit me up on social media. Like I said, my links to everything are in the description below. And I guess that's about it. I really think that's about it. I'm done talking about this subject. Now, don't get me wrong, though. If I'm watching Sisters in the Oval and something just wasn't good in terms of the writing, I'm going to bring it up. But I'm not going to just say, writer's room, writer's room. I want you to know that I did the best I could with this project, put everything I had into the research and thinking about what I said or say before I said it. And like I said, I wanted to apologize for the video I did a couple years ago about the Daily Mail article, which turned out to be false because Tyler Perry debunked it 2 days later. So thanks so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Have you kind of accepted that Tyler Perry isn't really going to change his methods per se in terms of his own writing, but you also appreciate that, yeah, even though I don't like how he writes this particular show, I understand that the success of these particular shows are necessary. That way he's allowed the opportunity to create other projects, which in turn creates opportunities for other writers, directors, and producers. So make sure you like and subscribe. If you want to donate to the channel, feel free to do so on PayPal or Cash App. And with that being said, I'll talk to you next time.